Good evening and welcome to our Jigsaw webinar for parents, facilitated by Jigsaw clinicians. Before we get started, I'll go through a few guidelines. You'll need headphones, earphones, or a quiet space. Please close all other applications running in the background of your computer. If you experience any problems with sound or vision, please check your internet connection. However, if you continue to experience difficulties through the webinar, please contact us on elearning@jigsaw.ie or ask a question to our moderator. During the webinar, we would encourage you to ask questions via the control panel. These will be directed to the facilitator and answered at the end of the session. Please note that we cannot hear or see you during the webinar unless you have agreed to become a panelist for the webinar. So how do I ask a question? On your screen, you will see a control panel. You can ask a question at any time through this control panel. After typing your question, press send or the enter key. You can also expand this control panel to full screen mode. Other attendees at the webinar will not see your questions. At the end of the session, please give us your feedback by answering the post-webinar survey. We hope you enjoy the webinar.
Hi, good evening, and welcome to tonight's webinar. This is a Jigsaw webinar for parents, and it's on the theme of supporting young people with their mental health in school. My name is Jen Trechek. I'm the clinical manager for Jigsaw Online, e-mental health clinical manager, and I'm an occupational therapist by background. Tonight we also have Linda Hogan, who's the senior Jigsaw clinician with Jigsaw Online, and also an occupational therapist. We have Ray Green, who is signing for us tonight, very kindly. Thank you, Ray. And will tell us to slow down if we need to. We also have Rebecca Murphy, who is a technical person in the background who is supporting us with questions and with the technology. One of the things that we think you can do is if you need to increase the size of Ray's camera, so you need to look at her signing a little bit more clearly, we think you can do that on your screen. There should be a button on her picture that you can enlarge her so you can focus on her. The webinar will be recorded, so you will be able to look at it on jigsaw.ie over the next few days, hopefully. We should get it up online. And as Rebecca said at the start, please do send in any questions that you might have as we go along, or comments or thoughts if there's things that strike you as we're talking that you'd like some more clarification on, or that you're not sure about, or maybe that you have some thoughts on yourself, then please do. We're not parenting experts. We work specifically with young people and their mental health. So we're coming at it from that angle. We're going to talk to you about what we know about youth mental health and what young people tell us about the support that they're looking for from parents, and what we've learned through working with parents in how they support young people's mental health in our work. So I've done the introductions.
Thank you.
What we're hoping to cover tonight is just talk a little bit about school and young people's mental health and how it can be affected by different aspects of school. We're going to talk briefly about what's changed, if anything, since COVID-19, and we're really conscious there's announcements and things happening tonight that might be a little bit distracting for people, and your mind might be there, so that's okay, we acknowledge that. We're going to look a little bit about when to be concerned for your young person when they might be struggling in school with their mental health, and then what you can do as a parent to support your young person's mental health. We'll talk a little bit about the end about other services and supports available too. So I'm going to hand over to Linda.
Great, thanks, Jen. So we wanted to start off with some research that we've completed within Jigsaw. And the reason that we wanted to do this was to really show that it's not unusual for young people to have difficulties in school. So this data comes from the My World survey that was completed in November 2019. So almost more than a year ago, feels a lot longer. But basically what that research was, there was 19,000 young people in Ireland between the ages of 12 and 25. and they answered questions about what their experience was like living in Ireland, what helped their mental health and what hurt their mental health, or some challenges that they experienced. So it was an open question, and 72% of attendees stated that school was something that they would have difficulty with, alongside homework and exams. So just to update that and to particularly look at pre-COVID, post-COVID, something that's definitely on everybody's mind. So this data was pulled from information with our Jigsaw hubs. So with young people coming to Jigsaw hubs, and what were the challenges that they were presented with. So I think it's particularly important because there's a lot of speculation around mental health and young people now, and people are wondering what's going on for them, what are the main difficulties. And you can see in the first, on the left-hand side, that the top presenting problems for young people between January and March, so before COVID, were anxiety and low mood were particularly high, and then sleep, stress and anger coming afterwards. And then quite a similar problems coming up for young people after COVID as well. So you still have anxiety and low mood, and then you have another sleep still a challenge, and a new thing which would be the family problems coming in at 10%. And I don't think that that's a surprise for anybody, considering the amount of time that we're all spending with our family, and also the increased pressure, restrictions. So that can be a challenge for young people. Sorry, thanks, Jed. I'm relying on you to be my clicker. So this is some information from our free phone service. So we can give you a bit more information on the free phone service towards the end of the presentation, but basically it's a free helpline for parents and young people, which operates between Monday and Friday, 1 to 5. So this is some of the problems that were encountered by young people, or as reported by parents that the young people were going through, coming up on the free phone. So with anxiety, 28% of young people were experiencing anxiety. And just to say that the free phone service operated in response to COVID. So this is around the time of COVID as well. Interestingly, 30% of the problems were to do with the longer term difficulties. So something that wasn't a direct result of COVID, but maybe something that a young person has been managing for quite some time. So maybe a formal diagnosis, or school, college, bullying, family relationships, stressful life events. Then we've got, of course, another column, which could be bullying, new job, conflict, if that's coming in around 10%. And then then we've got a quarter of young people dealing with, so again, a long-term challenge that they might have, but that it's actually impacted by COVID. So it might be a little bit worse now because of the current restrictions, lockdown, the changes with school, health, anxiety, and just general worry. So that's coming in at a quarter of young people. And then we've got 6% that is anxiety directly related to COVID. So again, that could be looking at health anxiety and the general impact of restrictions lifting. So what that would mean for a young person, and of course, return to school as well.
And just thank you to Dr. Aileen O'Reilly, who's our research manager at Jigsaw, for that data. And I suppose it's just really to highlight that anxiety is a common factor that we hear about through Jigsaw. We might have thought maybe the restrictions impacted and made it worse, but actually that's not necessarily the case. A lot of the people who were presenting with anxiety, it was pre-existing, and for some of them the lockdown made it worse, not for everybody. And the number of people presenting with anxieties or concerns purely due to COVID was not a huge number.
Great, so coming back to school specifically, and I suppose from September onwards, what we're hearing across the board, so through our Jigsaw live chat, what's coming up in the hubs, and through the helpline as well. So generally for young people, the readjustment to school after lockdown has been a challenge. For some young people, it was quite a nice break from school. It might have been maybe they were within their comfort zone. So there was less pressure to do at school, there was less expectations around social things, that they could stay at home and maybe do more things that they wanted to do, whether it be that gaming or whatever it is within the confines of the home. So to be taken from that and straight back into school was quite a challenge for a lot of young people. Of course, we have the transitions between either between primary and secondary, or secondary and then into either college or employment or whatever it is. There are always going to be times that, you know, anxiety is going to be high. But I think particularly now that transition is so different, and the experience is just, nobody has experienced it in this time. So that's kind of an extra challenge that young people are dealing with. Of course, the exam. Oh, sorry, go on.
So I just think on that transitions, we have heard from young people that they haven't maybe had a chance to close off, you know, leaving school, leaving primary school, or leaving a stage of schooling. So they maybe have still got a sense of loss or disappointment around that. And then there hasn't been the usual chances to engage at school or in the new area that they're moving into in the same way as they would have previously. So as well as the normal kind of concerns, they just haven't had a chance to go gently into that new experience.
Yeah, it's a really good point. With exam changes, I think that it goes without saying that, you know, all of the uncertainty around the Leaving Cert and Junior Cert certainly had an effect. And even going forward, nothing is 100% certain. It's open to change. So planning for that and arranging study times and things is definitely quite difficult for young people as well. We're seeing some difficulties with friendships as well, particularly within the live chat. We're seeing a lot of young people raising this. So it's just, I guess, with the bubble, with the pods now, the pods are the bubbles. It brings up some interesting, some new things for young people, that they might not be able to socialize with the friends that they used to, might not be able to make new friendships. And also, I think a lot of friendships are operated online now as well. So some young people feeling left out when they're not in a WhatsApp group, or maybe worried or anxious that they're not having as much contact with friends as their peers are. There's certainly an extra level of pressure there. Some worry about workload coming from school. So particularly with the continuous assessment, will every test count for a Leaving Cert grade? That's another extra pressure. And also with loss of motivation. So particularly, I think when young people can't do the things that they used to enjoy, maybe with sports or community engagement, hanging out with friends, those things, it can all combine to lead to a loss of motivation for a young person. I think it's really important as well to state that schools are really stepping up to the challenge, and I think that they're very much aware of the difficulties that young people are facing. So there are new supports coming through, and teachers and the board's management seem to really be trying to provide support for young people because of these extra challenges that they're facing.
So we know school can be tough, and it's fair to say this isn't for everybody. Some young people have fitted straight back into school and they're delighted to be back, and they're finding it a really positive experience. But the people that we're hearing from at Jigsaw are obviously people who are maybe struggling a little bit more. So I suppose as a parent, we get asked a lot, when should I be concerned? When should I be worried about my young person? We get asked, you know, what's normal for a teenager? What's normal for somebody in school? And what are the things that I should be kind of keeping an eye out for? So there's a few things to look at. What I would say is you as a parent know your young person best, and if you have a sense that something is not quite right for them, you're probably right. You're certainly right to check it out and ask some questions and try and find out a little bit more about what's going on. So trust your gut, trust your instinct on it. What we're looking for is changes. So some of these things, a young person might be like this all of the time. They might always be irritable, or they might always be argumentative. So it's not about that. It's about, has that changed? Have you noticed a change in how they're presenting over the last while? And I guess particularly since they've returned to school. So they might be a bit more irritable or tearful. Have you noticed a change in motivation? Maybe somebody who was very studious and engaged in school is now disengaging a little bit. Are they more upset or frustrated? You might find somebody who's maybe outright not wanting to go to school or avoiding school and telling you that. That doesn't necessarily mean it's to do with their mental health, but it's worth checking out. They might be looking for more reassurance or struggling with concentration. You might have very clear signs of anxiety, so things like somebody feeling sick continuously, or feeling restless, or having a panic attack when they're thinking about school. So some of the signs might be quite obvious, some of them might be a little bit subtle. But I suppose if you notice a change, then keep an eye on it. And we'd say if that change is starting to impact on their functioning, so your young person is maybe not doing the things that they need to be doing, so studying, going to school, engaging in relationships, or their activities that they normally do, if you've noticed a change in that and it's lasting for more than a few weeks, then really maybe ask some questions and find out a little bit more about what is going on for them. It's not saying that they are definitely struggling with their mental health, but it's certainly worth checking in with them on it. So the next thing is, well, how do you check in, or what do you ask? I would say the My World survey did highlight that actually having one good adult, so the presence in a young person's life of somebody who will listen and take notice to them, can have a huge impact on their mental health in a positive way. So that is very often a parent. It doesn't always have to be a parent, so it might be that your young person is speaking to a different adult, or maybe you as a parent are that one good adult for other people, for your kids' friends, for example. So just being aware of your role as a one good adult, you can't underestimate the value of that for your young person or for another young person. But if you're worried, the first thing is start a conversation. Talk to the young person about what is going on. And ask some questions, and we'll talk a bit more about that, but it can be a little bit nerve-wracking opening that up. So we're saying check in with them with empathy and compassion. And I suppose what we hear from young people is that they're often worried about criticism from parents. They're worried that they're going to be judged, or that you're asking questions because you're being nosy, or because you're trying to catch them out. So just checking in and letting them know that you're concerned, and that you're coming you're coming towards them from a place of concern rather than criticism. Help the young person to identify what's going on for them. So sometimes they know they're not feeling right, but they're not maybe connecting the dots as to why they're not feeling great. So trying to figure it out together, try and figure out, what's going on at the moment for you. Is this something that is school related specifically, or is it something that was maybe going on before school and school's making it worse? Or maybe it's nothing to do with school, it just happens to be playing out in school. So trying to figure out what exactly is going on with your young person. And then offering to help with problem solving. And we'll talk a bit more about this, but it's not rushing to problem solve for the person. It's helping them if that's something that they're looking for help and support with. So that all sounds really straightforward. It's often very not straightforward, and it can be quite nerve-wracking for everyone. This sounds really simple, but as a parent, sometimes we need to remind ourselves how to be a good listener, because our instinct is to want to jump in and to help and to do something. A lot of us want to sort things out for our children. So before we do that, it's taking a step back and really listening to what's going on. So that means staying silent, listening more than we talk. It can take a little bit of time, so we do need to give young people time to express what's going on for them, and it mightn't happen straight away. So if you have a conversation with a young person and maybe they don't open up, that's not them saying they don't want you to come back to it again in the future. It might be about coming back time and again and giving them the space to talk about what's going on. And this sounds straightforward, to not judge, and I think we all think that we're not judgmental, but it's things like things that might seem quite small to us can feel very big to a young person. So we might, we hear about a difficulty with a friendship or a difficulty with a teacher, and we might say, oh, it's not such a big deal, don't worry about it, and we're kind of judging it as being a small issue, it's fine. But that's kind of looking at it with the lens of us as adults who have a lot of experience of dealing with these things. So trying not to judge a young person's problem, just taking a step back and kind of seeing it through their eyes and how it might be for them is a really good thing to do. So a few do's and don'ts in general. So do listen, as we said. Looking for windows of opportunity. So if we approach a young person and have big chat and we sit down face to face, that can feel a little bit daunting or intimidating. So look for a moment when maybe you're side by side with the young person. Often driving together in the car can be a good time to do that. Or maybe you're making a meal together and you're having a chat, or going for a walk together. But trying to look for those opportunities just to touch in and see how somebody's doing without making such a big deal about it can be a good way to approach it. Don't be afraid to ask direct questions. So ask directly, how are you doing? How's your mood? How are you feeling? How are you coping with being back in school? How are you finding it? Be direct in what you're asking. Don't be afraid to comment on what you see. Again, not to criticize, but just to let the person know that you recognize what's going on. So, maybe you've noticed they're spending more time in their room, and say it. You're spending a bit more time in your room. Are you okay? Do you want to tell me what's going on? Or I've noticed that you've stopped contacting your friends as much as you had been. Is there something going on there that you'd like to talk about? Just giving them the chance to talk about what you see. Being aware of your body language, and that might sound simple, but if we're feeling tense and worried about approaching a subject, that can get communicated to the young person that they should feel a little bit nervous about what's going on. So try and make it as natural a conversation as you can, and be aware of trying to relax yourself as much as you can, even if you're a little bit nervous with approaching it. Instead of rushing in to solve the problem, just ask how you can help. What would be useful for the young person? And maybe they just want you to listen and to hear what they have to say, or to understand, and that's enough, and that's okay. So just ask, what would be helpful for them. You can encourage help seeking if you think, maybe your young person isn't opening up. Maybe you could ask them, you don't have to talk to me. Would you like us to look for somebody else for you to talk to? Would you like us to look at options to support you? There's lots of different options, and we'll come to that. As we said, trying not to judge, trying not to overreact. I think a lot of young people hold back because they're worried about mom or dad's reaction. So if they talk about a problem in school, is mom going to go straight down to the school and have a word with the principal? Or if they talk about their mental health, are they going to go straight down to the GP and have an assessment and go down a route that they're not ready for? So try not to react and jump straight in. Try and take a step back and just listen in the first instance. Try not to avoid or ignore the issue. Sometimes if we're not sure about it, or if we're nervous about it, we can put things off, and we don't want to ask the question because we're a little bit worried about what the answer will be. So try not to do that. We say to young people, the earlier we can address something, the easier it is to manage. So it's never too late, but the earlier we can do it, the easier it is. Don't dismiss their concerns, and it can be really easy to do this when we're trying to be reassuring to somebody. We'll say, oh, you don't need to worry about that. That's not a big deal. Let me worry about that. I'll look after it. And we kind of, not intentionally, but we do dismiss what they're telling us is a worry for them. So just be aware of not dismissing what they're saying, or minimizing it as a concern for them. If your young person does open up about what's going on for them, that's really great, but then don't just talk about the problems. Come back to some of the good things and the strengths that they have, and check in on the other areas of their life, not just the problem area. We've said this, but not rushing to solve the problem. Young people need to learn how to figure things out for themselves, and often they have the answers. They maybe just need a little bit of guidance or support or time to figure it out for themselves. And we know that if you tell a young person something, they'll often dismiss it. If they can figure it out themselves, they're more likely to take it on board. So give them time to work it out themselves. Don't tell them they're wrong to feel a certain way, and we often do this kind of naturally, going, oh, don't be silly, there's no need to worry, don't be upset by that, they didn't mean it, or we tell them that their feelings are not appropriate to not an appropriate response to the situation, which isn't helpful, because they're feeling that way, and that's okay. We just need to acknowledge that they're having that feeling, and then the next step is about addressing it. but just allow them to have those feelings. I think particularly with COVID and disappointments, we can kind of minimize that, you know, oh, it's fine, don't worry about that, missing out on that, it was only a party, or it wasn't that big a deal. And that kind of minimizes the feelings that they're having. And then young people can feel guilty for having those feelings too, which isn't helpful. And not using cliches. We can fall into that trap of cliches. So once we've listened to and really kind of tried to understand what's going on for a young person, we may want to start looking a little bit more with them as to how we can address what's going on.
Yeah, it's so hard to look into your eyes and be like, I'm going to step in. Yeah, so this I guess speaking a little bit about when your young person does want you to step in, and I guess a way of opening up that discussion. So we've used a specific example here about a young person that is finding school difficult or doesn't want to go into school. So asking quite an open question. So asking them to visualize walking into school, and then asking them what is the most difficult part of school. So it can be easy just to think of school as one thing, but really it encompasses so many things, and because of that it can encompass so many challenges as well. So breaking it down, is it the walking into school part that's difficult, or is it the organizing the books, you know, organizing homework, making sure things are in on time? Is it meeting so many different people and working with teachers, making friends? Or is it worries? Is it worrying about tomorrow, worrying about what happened yesterday, and just generally an anxiety around school? So by asking and identifying what is the one part, or one or two, three parts that are more difficult, it can help you to provide solutions for that. And we have a lot more information on jigsaw.ie about dealing with those specific things. So it can be quite a nice way of finding resources. We have included two resources that I'll take you through, but I guess we're only going to be giving a brief intro to these, and there's plenty of information on the internet, and also working with schools as well in terms of support. So the two examples that we chose are ones that we'd use a lot with young people in the live chat. So one of them is the circle of control. So it's a really simple exercise that we'd use. So you can draw it yourself with a pen and paper, drawing one circle, and that's the circle of things that you can control, and outside of that circle, the things that we can't. So for example, if a young person's feeling quite anxious about maybe socializing in the current restrictions, asking them to identify themselves and write down what can they control, so they can control their own behavior, so they can wear a mask, they can decide where they want to go, who they want to hang out with, washing their hands, things like that. What they can't control would be, you know, the government restrictions, the government decisions, and what other people do, what other people say about COVID, and just using those two circles to kind of get a sense of control, and it can help with when a young person's feeling maybe quite overwhelmed with the situation, just to kind of process it in that way. The other thing that I'll speak briefly about is the worry tree. Again, not everything is going to work for every young person, and worries are very real for young people and for all of us. So it's not a tool to be able to dismiss a worry quickly, but it is a way of dealing with a worry that might be going around and around and around in your head. So you'd start off at the very top and you'd identify, what am I worrying about? And then working down, is this a problem that I can do something about? And if it's no, then you go down and you let the worry go. And if it's a yes, then you work out, what are your options? What can you do? Is there anything that I can do right now? Yes, do it now. No, then plan, and then let the worry go. So it's kind of a way of working through a worry. It's quite simplistic, so it would require a little bit of chat around it and figuring out as well. So we wanted to include a little piece about fitting in school, because it's certainly something that a lot of young people are challenged with in school. And an important thing to say here as well, it's not so much about giving advice to young people, because it is so tough. It's more about providing reassurance and empathizing, and you know, just saying that because you don't fit in, it's nothing to do with you, it's just the situation. And it might be about increasing somebody's self-esteem and their own sense of self-worth. And a daily affirmation can be really helpful with this. So encouraging a young person to repeat something like, I'm confident, I'm comfortable in my own skin, I fully accept myself and know that I can achieve great things, are about uniqueness. It's great and it makes me who I am. So we also wanted to include a little bit about routine, something that's in the media a lot and something that I think we're all struggling to achieve now that there's so much uncertainty. But I think, you know, it really is so helpful, particularly for young people that are going through difficulty at school. Creating some semblance of a routine at home can be really helpful. And we've listed some of the benefits of a routine here as well, particularly in terms of sleep, productivity, motivation, managing expectations, and just generally creating a feeling of comfort in a time of so much uncertainty. But most importantly, it's to, I guess, be flexible about a routine as well. It's so difficult to create a routine, and particularly for a family and with children and young people. So giving yourself permission to have a flexible routine, to not be achieving a perfect schedule every day, and trying to get everybody on board when you are creating the routine can be really helpful as well. So it's kind of a shared responsibility within the family.
We just wanted to add in a little bit of information about Jigsaw online. So Jigsaw.ie has got a lot of different information for parents and for young people and for teachers and those working with young people. There's a range of online courses, webinars, there's articles and videos. We also have launched Jigsaw Live Chat, which is for young people between the ages of 12 and 25, where they can log on with very little information. It can be anonymous, and they can speak with a Jigsaw staff member about what's going on for them via text on their tablet or their computer or their phone. So it's a really easy and accessible way of accessing support from Jigsaw. The chat service, live chat, is available Monday, Wednesday and Friday between 1 and 5, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays between 2 and 8 in the evening, so young people can access it outside of school hours. And we also run live group chats where young people can talk to each other, and it's facilitated by a Jigsaw clinician. So just wanted to let you know that those services are available. We also have support for parents. So if you have a specific concern about your young person, you can ring 1-800-JIGSAW Monday to Friday, between 1 and 5. If a Jigsaw clinician isn't available there and then they will call you back. Or you can text call me with your preferred time and we'll try and call you back at that time. Or you can email help@Jigsaw anytime, and then we'll try and respond directly by email. So just a few options if you are looking for specific support. And we'll try and answer some of your questions tonight, but if we don't get to them and you want to email directly to help@Jigsaw, you're more than welcome to do that. So I think Rebecca's going to turn off the presentation sharing. And we have a few questions that have come in, so we'll try and respond to those. Is that okay, Rebecca? I think I've stopped it. Okay. So I've got a few questions here. I'll start with this one that has come in from Anna Maria about her daughter, who's nearly 15, is in junior cert and finding it hard in school. Last week she didn't want to go in at all. She was anxious on the 2 days and said no one talked to her at lunchtime. Since starting in first year, she's become anxious at different times throughout the school year and is unsure where it could be best to change whether it could be best to change schools or not. She's got an appointment with a counsellor next week, but it might be changed. I really hope the appointment isn't changed, and I know a lot of counselling services are now offering support via telehealth if they can't see people in person. So fingers crossed that you will still be able to have that appointment. I suppose in terms of thinking about changing school, I'd maybe dig a little bit deeper and figure out, if you can, with your daughter, is it school is the issue or is it anxiety in general is the issue? So maybe, does she experience anxiety in other circumstances? Does she struggle, for example, in social situations outside of school? In which case, it might not be the school is the issue, it might be an anxiety in general. either way, looking for ways to manage the anxiety is a really good approach. So trying to look at some practical things to manage anxiety. We do know with anxiety, the more we avoid a situation that's causing us to feel anxious, often the worse the anxiety can get. So you're saying she is anxious about going into school, but it sounds like you're supporting her in going to school and finding ways to manage in school, which is really great, because when we stop going, often we can lose confidence and begin to believe that we can't actually do it. So it sounds like you're doing the right thing and supporting her to go. The fact that she's struggling and nobody's talking to her at lunchtime is something that we do hear, and maybe checking in around, is there other ways that she can link in with other students in other years? It is difficult at the moment with COVID, because we know people are really kind of constrained with how they can link in with other people. Maybe think about friendships outside of school. Is there other people outside of school that or opportunities for her to develop those friendships outside of school? But hopefully your appointment with your counsellor is going to make a difference in a couple of days.
Great. Thanks, Jen. I've got a question in here. So the question is, I tend to check in with my daughter in the car, but I'm starting to feel that she associates the car journey with serious conversations. Should I continue as she does respond to car conversations, or should I change this pattern of checking in and ensure that talking and checking isn't always in the car? So I think you spoke, Jen, a little bit about creating those windows of opportunities for conversations. And the car is a really good place to have a conversation, but I guess you've almost answered the question yourself, that maybe if she's associating the car journey with a serious conversation, she might try and avoid it, or it might create a bit of anxiety in her. So I think it would be a good idea to maybe open it up and think of other ways that you might like to have a chat. So it could be depending on what you enjoy doing with your daughter. So it could be going for a walk, or when you're chilling out on the couch, or whatever it is. If you're getting a sense that she's coming into the car and not really open to having a chat, I think it will be a good idea just to open it up a little bit.
Or it sounds a little bit like if it's working in the car, which is great. It's just if you're not able to go in the car, does she know that there's other opportunities to do it? So maybe even just saying it to her, you know, we often have these conversations here, but I just want to let you know that you can come to me anytime, and we can have them, you know, at home in the bedroom, or we can go for a coffee or whatever. So you're just offering her the choice. But if it's working and she's opening up to you in the car, that's great. Keep doing it. There's a question: how do I support a child who has school friends dealing with mental health issues? From Louise. And that's actually a question we often get from young people themselves as well. They say, I'm worried about my friends, they're self-harming, or they're anxious, or there's whatever it is going on for them. And what we would always say to young people is kind of knowing about what their boundaries are and what their role is. And their role is that of a friend. It's not to be a counsellor, and it's not to hold responsibility for another person's mental health. So just really encouraging them to think about that. And what does being a friend mean? It means being there for them, talking to them, absolutely, but not holding responsibility for what's going on. And often when young people are trying to support other young people, it takes a toll on them as well. So is your child doing to support their own mental health, or how are you supporting them to be okay? Taking some time out for their own self-care, and helping them to recognize that that's actually really important. We do say to parents, look after your own oxygen mask first. You can only look after other people if you're looking after yourself. And it's the same for young people. They can only be friends and be there for their friends as they want to be if they're looking after themselves first. So making sure that they know that they don't have to take that responsibility on for supporting another young person.
So I have a question here. Do you have any ideas on how to encourage young people to engage with the live chat, etc.? We have a 14-year-old who has talked about suicide. She's seeing a therapist and has been referred to CAMHS. She listens when we suggest resources such as yours, but is proving reluctant to engage. So I'm really sorry to hear that with your 14-year-old. That sounds really tough. But the fact that she's seeing a therapist and also has been referred to CAMHS is really, really good. I would say that you know, it is difficult if we can kind of, if it's hard for a young person to engage with the resources that we think could be really helpful. But the fact that she's seeing a therapist is really, that's really positive. And obviously speaking with you as well, I don't think that every resource works for every young person. So it might be about that, the fact that it's live chat, that it's writing something down. There could be a number of reasons that it might not be their favorite option. But just providing them with the information there for them to make a decision. The thing with the live chat as well is that it's a single session. So the therapist at least will be seeing the young person however many times, and it's more of a continuation of support. So I would prioritize the therapist as a resource and your conversations with the young person and giving them support directly. It would be great if they engage with our live chat, of course, but the fact that they're seeing a therapist and refer to CAMHS, that's a really fantastic place to start.
Quiva has a teen who's anxious about going to school and COVID and either catching it or coughing and people talking about him. There is a lot of anxiety for all of us around that, and we have been hearing that anxiety. And I suppose with all anxieties, it's trying to talk about it and then look at what the reality of the situation is. What do we know? What can we control? What can we not control? So, you know, there is a risk, unfortunately, that somebody might get sick. But if they did, you know, what are the chances of it? What are we doing to mitigate against that? Are we doing everything that we can possibly do to look after ourselves in terms of the, you know, hand washing, masks, all the rest of it? And yet, yes, we are. What strengths do we have that if, you know, anything, God forbid, does happen, how will we support each other? How will we get through it? And helping a young person to recognize the strengths that they have to cope. People talking about them, I mean, it's a tricky one because people might, and we can't know if they are or not. But maybe asking the so what question, you know, if people are, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? What is it that somebody talking about you, what does that mean for you? Why does that make a difference to you? And is there a way to manage those feelings? So just having the conversation, there isn't a quick and easy answer to it. In terms of general anxiety management techniques and approaches, still using those regardless of the reason. And we do have an article on Jigsaw.ie about health anxiety in relation to COVID specifically, so some of the concerns that people do have. So maybe encourage them to have a look at that and see if that is helpful to them at all.
So I have a question in. My son is suffering with anxiety but doesn't want to talk about it. So I would say hopefully the presentation was helpful in what we said about listening and creating those opportunities for chats. It could be the case that the word anxiety is anxiety provoking in itself, so it could just be about asking more open-ended questions, maybe about how the day is going, anything good about the day, anything bad about the day, listening and doing things together, and just creating situations where you can talk in maybe a bit more of a relaxed environment or in a relaxed setting. It could also be maybe that your son is speaking to somebody, hopefully, about the anxiety or about what they're going through. They could have somebody in school that they're speaking to, or friends. And of course, if you don't feel that that is the case, maybe just creating a circumstance that you can maybe let them know what resources are there, for example, like the live chat or different things that they might feel more comfortable talking to somebody else that's not a parent. It is tough when you feel like you're kind of, you don't know what's going on with your son. But there are, you know, there are definitely lots of ways that you can go about having maybe a bit more of an informal chat about it, and letting them know about the resources that are there when they do want to speak.
Question from Audrey, whose daughter is 12 and has been really anxious about going back to school. She's actually settled in really well, but still has wobbly days. And we've talked to her about different ways for her to manage, but much of the advice I give, she dismisses as she thinks I don't understand. So what should you do? It's so true. what we often find is, as a health professional, we will say one thing and we're saying exactly the same thing as a parent, but because it's coming from somebody who isn't a parent, a young person might be more likely to listen to it, which is feels so unfair. I'd maybe take a step back instead of getting to the advice stage, and just listen and try and understand, and just let your daughter know that you do understand, and then maybe give her the ball. You know, what would you like to do about this? Ask her how she might like to approach it. You know, pointing out where she's doing really well, and giving her that, you know, you said she's still she's doing really well, and but has wobbly days, so highlighting to her her strengths and what she is doing well, and how it's going, and just acknowledging that with her. But maybe asking her, you know, what, on the days that you're struggling, what do you need from me? What would be helpful? What would you like to do? And really giving her ownership of that. I think 12 is a tricky age, because we're still viewing a 12-year-old as a child, whereas maybe they're wanting a little bit more independence and to figure things out. So it's a really fine balance. It's a hard line to walk as a parent, because you know the answer, you know what they need to do, and you want to tell them it, because you want them to avoid the heartache of figuring it out themselves. But unfortunately, the best way for them to learn is by going through and experiencing some of that heartache and figuring out how to manage and make their own decisions. And for you as a parent to allow that, and let them know that you're there for them if they need you at whatever point they need you. So you're doing the right thing to keep being there for her, keep checking in, but maybe allowing her to make some more decisions around how she chooses to manage, if that's feasible. I don't know, does that answer that, Linda?
Yeah, definitely. So I've got a question in. My 17-year-old daughter has a diagnosis of anxiety and depression. School really makes this worse at times. Do I make her go to school, or let her stay at home when she's really bad? It's a difficult situation. What I would say would be, unfortunately, there's no clear-cut answer to it, but I would say to open up your questions again here. So what is it about school that is a challenge? So does it make the anxiety or the depression worse? And what specifically about school? Is it the social aspect of school, or is it the work? Is it the exam pressure? And when you can kind of find out specifically what is going on, then you can look at putting supports in place. So it might be about working with the school to see if there are particular classes that she needs to attend, because she have some, like, you know, less time within the classroom environment. It could be about, you know, looking at getting support, working with the guidance counsellor, looking at having kind of a safe space within the school, somewhere that they could go and have just be on their own whenever they needed to. Working with the school on that, I think, could be really helpful if you haven't already. And again, just creating opportunities to speak with your daughter, and to understand their experience a little bit more as well.
Trudy is asking how to support her daughter dealing with an increase in her anxiety when she's dealing with an intimidating teacher. Her daughter is good at the subject, but the teacher's manner frightens her and she wants to avoid her classes. Other students are also scared of her. I mean, it's not a great position to be in, where you're scared of a teacher. So I would wonder whether it's worth having a conversation with the year head, if your daughter is open to it, just to highlight that maybe that there is an issue with this teacher, with the younger classes in particular. In terms of what you can do with your daughter, I suppose it's reassuring her that there's nothing wrong. You know, anxiety is there to protect us when we're feeling worried about something. So the fact that she's feeling anxious because she's worried about potentially a teacher's approach to her makes sense. You know, it's then how to deal with the teacher seems to be more of the issue, rather than dealing with the anxiety. And that might be around helping your daughter a little bit more with how to be assertive, how to talk to the teacher in a particular way. And that might be something you'd like to practice with her in advance. But it certainly does sound like the anxiety, if it's just in relation to this particular class, it's not maybe the anxiety and dealing with anxiety is the issue. It's maybe more dealing with the class, and the teachers is the issue, perhaps.
So I have a question in. My son is very anxious about being at school during COVID. He's off at the moment and seeing a counsellor. He has his second session this week. We're hoping to get him back in gradually after midterm. Have you any advice that I can give him to encourage him to get back to school? So it's brilliant that he's engaging with the counsellor, and I hope that that's going well. What I would say, like sometimes at Jigsaw we use what's called like a strengths focused approach. So looking at looking at positives and looking at, you know, your son's strengths. So what kind of skills can he use to get him back to school? So maybe he is maybe he can be quite calm, or maybe he's a really good friend. He could be a good listener. He could be good at sports. He could be good at his studies. And then looking at how he can use those skills getting back to school, so it can kind of be something that he'd look forward to. Also looking at maybe making a goal, so getting him back in gradually is definitely a nice idea. So what would be a short-term goal for him, something that would be achievable? So it could be about spending a morning in school, or you know, 3 days, or whatever it is, whatever works depending on what's going on for him. So it doesn't seem like just a quick straight back into school. It can be a little bit slower than that, and that will be a little bit less stressful for him, I'd imagine, as well.
I've got a question from Sarah. How can I encourage my 14-year-old to take part in family activities and not spend too much time in her room? Now that they use technology more for schoolwork, she's drawn to her room where she can chat with her friends and be on social media. That's a great question, and I think possibly one that you would be asking even without technology being in the picture, in that I think young people are often drawn to spending more time with their friends and less time with their family as they get older. I think being really clear, you know, what your expectations are in terms of time spent with the family. You know, what do you want? What do you expect from your daughter? And making sure that everybody's buying into that as well, so that you're setting aside that time yourself, maybe getting consensus as to what it is that means, what it is that you want to be doing. You know, family time is this kind of nebulous idea, but what are you doing in that time? How are you spending that time together, and how are you all benefiting from it, so that she can see what the benefits are to her, and she's enjoying it and being part of the family. But that she knows that is part of being a family is important, and that you have expectations for her to engage. The fact that technology is used for school and does allow for a lot more connectivity does make it more difficult to set those boundaries. So being clear, you know, what's allowed and what's not allowed, and when and how much time, you know, you think it's okay for her to spend either in her room or on technology, or both. So having that conversation with her, setting the boundaries, and then allowing her the chance to agree or disagree, or you know, where can she maybe can you come to some arrangement or agreement as to what's acceptable or not?
I've got a really good question in here, and thank you for highlighting this. So the question is, I wonder, do the parents of the 14-year-old who spoke about suicide have support for themselves? Any chance you could mention options for parents in this situation? Thanks. So thank you so much for raising that, because I think it's a really important point about self-care for parents and looking after your own mental health, particularly when you're supporting a young person that's going through such a difficult time. Particularly in relation to thoughts of suicide or self-harm, Pieta House are a fantastic supportive organisation, and they do provide support for families, as well as the young person that will be going through that experience. So Pieta House, they have online supports for young people, but I'm not sure, Jen, you might be able to tell me about their supports for families right now. I'm not sure about COVID. I know that previously they had counselling, family counselling, but I know that also in terms of Jigsaw, we've got a self-care course for parents, and we have a lot of different articles available about information for support for parents, and looking at your own support networks, and making time for yourself for your self-care. How are you relaxing, and how are you getting time for yourself, and how are you managing, because it is really challenging to deal with all of that, and there's a lot of pressure involved in that. So I think that, you know, like Jen said before about the life mask, putting it on yourself first, I think that's a really good metaphor, because you can only really care for somebody else if you're looking after yourself. So thank you very much for raising that question. It's a really important thing to discuss.
Absolutely. I think we've got time just for one or two more. There's a quick one here from Jane. A 15-year-old daughter had a panic attack before school recently and was so upset she couldn't calm herself down. Is there any techniques you could use to help her? A really quick and easy grounding technique that we often advise young people to use is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, using your 5 senses. So that is you've got 5 senses, and so first of all, name 5 things that you can see around you, or 5 different colors, and actually get the young person to say it out loud. 4, touch 4 different surfaces or 4 different textures, so using your touch. 3, listen and see if you can hear 3 different noises or sounds in the room or outside or around you. 2, is there 2 things that you can smell or taste with your tongue? Might be something in the air, or something that you've just eaten. And then 1 is 1 big deep breath through your nose and out. And it's a way to try and bring the young person back into themselves and their surroundings. Often when they're having a panic attack, their focus is all over the place, their breathing is all over the place, and they're finding it hard to kind of regulate themselves. So it's really just about bringing them back into the moment. So that's just one example of a grounding technique that it can be helpful to talk through with a young person. And often it can help to talk through it not in the moment, but at a time when they're calmer, and say, remember you had that panic attack. It's really difficult when you're in the middle of a panic attack to regulate it. One of these things that you could do and try is this. Try it when they're feeling a bit calmer, and then hopefully when they start to become a bit more stressed or a bit more panicked, they can remember how to do it. So that would be just one quick one. Another quick one is belly breathing, which is where you're breathing in right down into your diaphragm for 4, holding it, and then breathing out for 4, but getting them to count in their heads. So often our thoughts are going all over the place, and by focusing on counting and breathing, we're starting to calm down the kind of over breathing that can happen in panic attacks and the overthinking that happens. So just two quick ones to try. Do we have time for one more there, Linda? Do you have a quick one, or are we?
I don't know, is there any such thing as a quick one? Because I think there's so much going on for everybody. I can read this one out and see your thoughts. How can I keep my son motivated? Cannot get out of bed in the morning to go to school or anything, basically. He struggles to actually get out of bed and get on with the day. If it gets past the time for school, he gets really frustrated with himself and turns over and goes back to sleep, and often won't get up till 3 or 4 p.m. Now he says he will get help, and have tried to get him to connect with the live chat, but keeps putting it off. Very frustrating, and it's tough going in the house. He's 17 and in leaving cert. We think it's anxiety, but not sure. So that is really challenging, and challenging for all of the family when that's going on as well. So I would wonder, from your son's perspective, what's going on, and if there's been an opportunity to speak with him about school, or just generally about how things are. You know, needing to sleep for that long, it is quite unusual, and I wonder, is he staying up late at night, and is that why, or is it more about low mood or anxiety, as you've mentioned? It seems like, you know, there could be something going on, and it would be worth having a chat with him. I think, yeah, sorry, Jen, go on.
I just think sometimes there's a fear of failure as well, and you know, if I can't do something perfectly or brilliantly, then I'm not going to bother. And I think for a lot of young people heading back into school, particularly when they've maybe fallen behind a little bit on work, or they're struggling to get into it, there's kind of a point of, well, I'm going to give up now, there's no point. So I would say it might be helpful just to let him know that, you know, even if you can only go in for a little bit of the day, we'd prefer that to none at all. So it's not a waste. You know, if you miss the first few hours, that's okay, as long as you can try, and we'll be proud of you for trying. And then gradually kind of help him to realize that he can do it, because it sounds like he might have lost a little bit of confidence in himself, or he thinks he's not going to do well, and so he's kind of letting go. So just letting him know that what he can do is enough, and gradually building it up. And he did say he's maybe thinking about live chat or Jigsaw, which I think would be really good, because just a little bit of support to help him to reset where he wants to be, and kind of remind him of what his goals are, and then look at some practical motivational strategies for him might be really useful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We do have a few more questions, but I'm really aware that we've kind of hit the 9 o'clock mark. So unfortunately, we're going to have to finish up without reaching all of those questions. But thank you for such a range of really interesting and really helpful questions.
Yeah.
I think a lot of parents struggling with very similar issues. So hopefully some of the answers from tonight might be helpful. You are welcome to submit any questions that haven't been answered into help@Jigsaw, and we'll do our best to respond. We do say with all of the webinars, you know, it's limited what we, you know, we're not asking lots of questions about what's going on. So if any of our answers don't resonate or they don't fit with your thinking or where you're at, that's absolutely fine. You know, just ignore them and take what's helpful for you and disregard the rest. There isn't a really quick and easy answer to any of these things, and there's no one size fits all. So if it's not helpful to you, ignore it and take what is helpful to you. But thank you so much for your participation in tonight.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed your questions. Thank you, Ray, for the signing. You're probably exhausted now.
Yeah.
We have 2 more webinars coming up. So we will have a webinar in November, and the theme will be around support for parents. We recognize you're doing a really tough job, and young people are finding it hard in COVID times, and specifically parents are also finding it really tough. And if we're not looking after ourselves, then it's really hard to be there for young people, and they need to see us role model how to support our own mental health. So if you can come along to that webinar, you'd be most welcome. And then a webinar in December will focus around the theme of family conflict, and particularly as we head into a little bit more lockdown and being in the houses a little bit more, we know it can get tough and boundaries can get pushed, and it gets harder to maintain those kind of positive communications. So if that's an area that interests you, please do sign up for the December webinar as well. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.